Good morning, Commsverse. This session is called Talking Quality and is presented to you by Matthew Wade from Microsoft. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to, what are we at? We're at 137 session. My name is Matthew Wade with Microsoft, and today we're just going to be talking a little bit about quality. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself because I'm relatively new to the external public speaking world. I do a lot of stuff within Microsoft, but I don't really venture outside of Microsoft a whole lot. So I'm kind of excited to get out and start sharing my experience outside of my own little bubble here. So I've been working at Microsoft. I'm in my 9th year at Microsoft. Started as a consultant working out of Premier Services. Spent a couple years doing that. Then I moved into a Premier Field Engineer role. So some of you might be familiar with the PFE. Spent a couple years doing that before I ended up getting sucked up into the product group, where I've been spending the last couple years. First off, working in Skype for Business and getting people in Skype for Business, then taking the shift over to Teams. And the last 2 years, I've been working pretty heavily on getting people into Teams, but then also working with the quality as well and improving quality, spending pretty much most of my day either helping a customer get to Teams or helping them fix something or make the product better. Been doing this for about 22 years, 16 years as an actual consultant. I've lost track of how many customers I've worked with over the years. It's easily well over 200 customers. I've done little flower shops all the way up to big giant customers that span multiple continents around with multiple different regulations and stuff. But all the entire time I've been doing it, it's with a passion for quality and just trying to make the service as best as it can be for our customers. If you want to know a little bit more about me and get in touch with me, you can check me out on LinkedIn. I unfortunately don't really do Twitter. I do Twitter socially, but not professionally. But you can catch me on LinkedIn. You can send me questions on LinkedIn as well. I also do frequent some of the Microsoft Tech community quality channels as well. If you're in there as well, I do get in there from time to time, but LinkedIn's probably the best way to reach with me if you have any questions at the end that we don't get answered and stuff, because I know we got a limited amount of time today, and so I've got a lot of good content. And for all of you that are interested, today is a big geek session, right? So we're going to be doing probably some 300 level, 400 level type content. And then of course you can ask me questions as we go along too as well. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about some tips and tricks. So with COVID coming with COVID here, I'm spending a lot of time helping customers, a lot of net new customers, first-time cloud customers that have been going from an on-prem solution into a cloud-based solution. And there's about three areas that just keep cropping up every single time. I mean, I get another request to go to customer, and it's usually one of these three things is popping up. So I'm going to share with you some of those, right? Maybe they'll help you out. Maybe they'll help you from making a support call or something that you can implement right away and help improve your user's experience. We'll also talk a little bit about the tools that I use, the tools of our trade, and then I'm going to finish up with a demo on Power BI and show you some of the cool new things that have been introduced in Power BI and that you can do with Power BI, specifically around what we call the QER, the Quality of Experience Review. So I'm the original author of that, one of the original creators of the QER. If you've ever seen the QER guide or used the QER templates in CQD, that was my little baby. So hopefully you've enjoyed it, you liked it. And so what we're going to do in Power BI is show you the QER in Power BI. All right. So moving right along. Tips and tricks, right? So there's really three areas that we're going to talk about here. And the first one is QoS. It is still the best known way to protect traffic while it's on your network. Just because it's not end-to-end and you're going to lose the markings in the cloud doesn't mean that it cannot have value. Right, having a QoS implementation on your machine is a really, really good insurance policy. Right, it's just kind of one of those things where it can be a pain to implement. It can be a lot of work. It can take away bandwidth, but it's one of those things where it's the only way that currently we have to really guarantee traffic, right? And so that when it hits your network, that there's nothing in your network that's going to impede it, and then it's going to have free access to flows it needs to across your network. I can't tell you about, enough. This is something that just customers need to start doing, right? You actually spend very little time on the public internet. Microsoft has over 200 egress locations around the world that you can connect to. So your chance, the time that you're going to spend on the public internet is going to be really, really short. Most of that traffic is going to be on your network and the Microsoft network. The public internet just accounts for a very small piece of that network. Don't forget about your Wi-Fi. People that I've had customers implement QoS and completely forget about the Wi-Fi network, when in reality, I'd like you to flip it, right? If you're going to do QoS, or if you're struggling to do it and the justification's not quite there, you can't get the support behind it, go after the Wi-Fi networks, right? Wi-Fi is really a problem area, especially when we're working from home. I know we can't do QoS at home, right? But when it's on your network and in your office, that's where you want it. Think about all the devices people have, the Wi-Fi, the smartwatches, the phones, maybe they've got 2 phones, maybe they have 2 laptops, right? All those other devices, coffee makers, microwaves are all on Wi-Fi now, right? So everything's getting on Wi-Fi. And so what it does is it can quickly saturate your Wi-Fi. Obviously, we want to prefer 5 gigahertz over 2.4 gigahertz. We're definitely going to see better performance there, but don't forget about your Wi-Fi networks. Turning on wireless multimedia extensions can be a real quick thing that you can do to net you about a 10 to 20% increase in call quality with just one simple change. It's not going to be the magic bullet, but it can buy you some time, right? It'll buy you some time. Turn on the QoS markers in Teams, right? So all of these links, you're going to get a copy of this, my presentation later, and all of these little highlighted blue things are URLs, links that you can click on. It'll take you right to the information. But for this particular one that we're talking about here, we're talking about inside the tenant admin center. There's an option in there that you can turn on the QoS markers in there. And really what that does is that serves as kind of, it separates the traffic, right? So if it's not on and it's off because it's typically off by default, right? All the traffic for Teams, for media throws through 3478 UDP, right? Which is the kind of the legacy port, right? It's all grouped together. When you flip the QoS marker, basically what we're doing on the server side is we're separating out audio, video, and screen sharing into the 3 separate ports. So you've got 3479, 3480, and 3481 now respectively. What that allows you to do in combination with a static set of IP addresses, subnets, we have 3 subnets, that allows you to manually mark those incoming packets, right? And so a common thing that I see a lot of times is when people do implement QoS is they only implement it on the client, and so it's only on outgoing traffic, right? It's not on the incoming, and the incoming is actually more important than the outgoing, right? The incoming is typically where we see a lot of the problems. Think about it with video. I've got my video turned on, and then you might have multiple incoming video streams. So that incoming video stream is usually a factor of 5 to 10 to 1 over an outgoing stream. So so the nice thing about it is having those markers set in there, being able to separate that traffic allows you to mark those packets, at the egress, the ingress. So it's coming in, because it's coming in from a specific set of subnets that are Teams and Skype only. It's coming across a specific set of ports. Its destination is a specific port. It's pretty easy to mark the traffic because you have a high guarantee that that kind of traffic that you're dealing with is going to be media traffic, right? So it allows you to kind of do it. Max will get set automatically. Unfortunately, we can't change it at this point, but we do set it to audio gets EF, video gets AF41, so you can take advantage of that. Browsers are the only things that kind of break the rules right now. I know we have some work on this, but right now browsers just kind of use whatever port they want. I know there was some logic in there, and the reason why that they chose this because they couldn't really determine what ports are going to be open in a client. So we just basically will try to use whatever port is available through a browser. What that does though is it kind of breaks QoS rules, right? And it makes it really hard to set QoSs from a browser standpoint. So I know there's work in that space coming. Unfortunately, I don't have any timeline. Mobile client support is coming as well. So what will happen is when you flip the switch, we'll actually start adding markers to mobile clients as well. Again, I talked about manually marking incoming traffic from your service at ingress. So as it comes into the network, you can use the combination of IP subnets that we have with the different ports to manually mark it according to whatever policy you want to do. I usually will typically recommend customers start with audio and mark the audio first. In my experience, you can be kind of forgiving on video, but your users typically are not very forgiving about poor audio. When it comes to poor audio, they just, it's a completely different animal in the business space than it is a consumer space, right? So video can kind of a little muffle. Screen sharing, of course, screen sharing's got to be perfect every time. So you can do screen sharing if you want. But that's up to you. right? We at Microsoft will usually do audio. Most of my customers typically do audio only. But don't forget about the inbound traffic. That's the important takeaway from this slide here. Protect that inbound traffic and your wire and your Wi-Fi network. The next topic we're going to spend a few minutes here is VPN split tunneling. We actually have some new guidance that was just published very recently, right? So I've put the links in here for you, right, to help you, get you to that guidance so that you can get specifically to vendor guidance. We have Microsoft vendor, we have Palo Alto, we have Cisco. There's a couple other vendors in there that we have direct links in there straight to guidance from the vendor to implement your split tunnel solution. Focus on the optimized category of subnets, ports, and protocols. You can use this shortcut aka.ms/teams IPs, and what you're looking for is the optimized category. It's ID 11. That's what you want to focus on when you're doing your split tunnel. The rest of the traffic is not latency sensitive, right? And you can route it and continue to route it through a tunnel. Our recommended guidance, of course, is always to route any internet traffic out through the public internet, right? So that you're not sending that traffic across your WAN link. Microsoft, typically likes to, we're a trusted provider, we're a trusted cloud service provider. So sending the traffic to us is typically within your best interest because you're going to spend, that way the traffic's not going across your VPN, and that VPN is not necessarily handled for that much traffic. If you think about with COVID, typically a VPN, infrastructure is maybe designed to have 20 to 40% remote workforce, depending on your organization. But with COVID, we've been doing 80, 90 to 100% people remote. That really taxes a VPN system, right? So getting this traffic split, getting the VPN, getting that media traffic split off, it's not really a nice to have anymore. It's almost a must to have, right? So these are some of the, ways that we can kind of help get you past all that. Now, the other thing that we want to kind of take into account here is the way that Teams actually acquires the route, right? It relies on the local routing table, and typically we'll do what's called a get best route. You can look that function up. And so what we're doing is Teams is doing a get best route when it tries to determine the most optimal path. And unfortunately, what happens is many VPN vendors change that 0.0.0.0 network to the VPN adapter, because the VPN adapter shows up as an Ethernet adapter, and Ethernet is typically preferred over wireless. And if you're working from home, there's a really, really good chance you're on a wireless network. And so when you're on a wireless network and you fire up the VPN kind of masks that network and it turns it into an Ethernet adapter. So as far as the operating system is concerned, it's an Ethernet adapter. And so if you print out your routing table and you see 0.0.0.0 is attached to your VPN adapter, you've got a problem, right? Because what's going to happen is Teams is going to still send traffic out the preferred route, and that's going to be your VPN. Now, what's really nice is you can actually go in and change all this, right? Your vendors will have guidance on how to change all this to basically, again, VPN adapters get marked as wired. So again, we just want to make sure that things are routing properly. Now, there's a little trick that you can do. And some customers, I've had to do this, and this works really, really well. It's actually been working so well that I've started putting into my base recommendations for customers to do split tunneling. And that is to block the client ports, right? Now, the way that we actually establish media is both directions have to succeed. So if both directions are trying to establish a connection over these client ports and one direction fails, then it just moves on to the next candidate pair, as they called it. So what you can do here is by blocking incoming, so it's coming in from the internet into the VPN appliance to the client, incoming 50,000 through 50,059 TCP and UDP, you can effectively shut down any and all Skype or Teams media traffic across the VPN. It's not going to happen, right? And so the split tunnel routing rule in combination with this blocking rule is a really, really effective way to just shut it down. You'll effectively kill peer-to-peer traffic, and you'll also kill any Skype for Business server scenarios where you might be joining a meeting hosted in another organization that has an on-prem infrastructure, and you're joining their Skype for Business server meeting, and you might be joining it either through, the client. Maybe you still have the Skype for Business client loaded on your desktop, so you're using the local client, so it effectively will eliminate that. Now, of course, it doesn't work for browsers because browsers just do what Browsers do what browsers do, but it is a really, really effective way to just kind of stop the traffic, especially the peer-to-peer. Don't forget about the peer-to-peer. A lot of customers, you might actually have probably a 60-40, if not a 50-50 relationship between meetings and peer-to-peer traffic. So by blocking the meetings traffic, that's great. Your meetings will improve, but your peer-to-peer is still going to suffer, right? So block that port range. All right, last but not least here, echo, right? I've been fielding it's like one call a week seems to be coming in here on echo, right? And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how Teams manages echo, right? And so we have the acoustic echo cancellation function. We're going to call that AEC for now because that's a mouthful. It relies on CPU, right? And if your machine is using heavy CPU, if you've got other things you're doing in the background, maybe you're chugging away on a spreadsheet, or you've got a runaway browser process, or just something else is going on in the machine that's using those CPU cycles, you can actually leak out echo, right? So echo will actually, the AEC function will not kick in or can't keep up, and you start getting echo. Right, so that's a really good thing to look at if you have a user that calls in, or people calling complaining of echo. It's typically generated by one or two people in the meeting, right? And they should be really easy to identify who the creator of the echo was. And once you identify the creator of the echo, then you can go and work with that person to try to figure out what's, is it the CPU that's causing the echo or not, right? VDI, right? Unoptimized media on VDI is another big contributor, right? So we actually have been working with a number of vendors through Citrix and VMware. I know VMware, I'm not sure if they're public yet. I think they're in preview right now. I know Citrix is published. VMware was delayed a little bit as they tried to rework some scenarios. I don't know where they are at today. But you need to actually look at doing what's called optimized media. And that basically, it's like the old Skype for Business days. It just takes the media and puts the management of the media and the connection of the media down to the client instead of the server. So that shared CPU is what's typically causing the echo. So if you have a lot of VDI people that are joining meetings and producing echo, then my recommendation is for you is if you can't do the optimized media solution, or you're just too far out, you've got to develop it and test it and implement it because it requires some changes to the server and the client. What I typically recommend is try to do dial in or call me back, or use the mobile client. Pick up your phone, use your phone, but try not to use the mobile client, or try not to use the Teams client in VDI to do the media, do the audio. Save it for something like screen sharing, right? But don't use it for audio, right? All right, another good thing is here, AC doesn't like it when the microphone and speaker are on a separate hardware, right? So this is actually, you see this a lot in built-ins, right? Where the microphone and the speaker are listed as two separate devices in Device Manager, right? This often can cause a problem. In some instances, the Teams client won't, it creates echo, right? Because the speaker, it's coming back and it's picking up, and it just creates this feedback loop. And we've been working really hard. Our media team, our echo, the team is responsible, is working really hard to train it and teach it better. And we do have a support process I'm going to talk about here in a second that you can use to help, right? But typically what will happen is if you have somebody that's joining the meeting and they're joining with a lot of echo, if it's not a CPU thing, then check to see what device they're using, right? Typically, a lot of times too, you can trace it down to like a specific make and model of laptop or speaker, right? If it's an external speaker or something. It's rare that it's an external USB-based speaker like a puck or something. It's mostly tied to built-in devices when people are using their laptop and they flip it up, and Teams just doesn't understand what's going on, right? So it just creates a problem, but it's pretty easy to track down and trace who the creators are, and you can give them a certified device, or honestly, any USB device will work. A certified device will guarantee that AEC does kick in, but any USB device will produce a better response than trying to use those built-ins. Not all built-ins are created equal, right? Educate your users, though, if they are, to mute themselves. I know in some instances, I've actually worked in some cultures, muting yourself is actually considered a sign of disrespect, right? But in this case, in this work from home model, going on mute is, if you're creating echo, just keep yourself on mute, right? It's pretty easy to tell if you're on echo and you're creating echo and you go on mute and echo disappears, right? Or if you're the receiver of the echo, you can look and see that somebody's little boxes lighting up, and you can see who, you'll speak and then you'll see another box light up. So it gets pretty easy to go and check who's contributing to that echo and ask them to mute themselves, or work with them offline to maybe get them a device or something like that, or try to figure out, keep track of the hardware, the make and model that they have, because if their hardware is doing it, then chances are somebody with that exact same make and model is going to have that problem as well. If it does become a problem, open up a support case, right? We do have a process that which we can give you, but you need a support case to do it, right? Because we need to have some place to store the data. It's a pretty aggressive process. It does require you to recreate the echo with recording, and you have to do a special recording, capture all this data, send some log files to us. We can analyze the log files to understand what's going on, whether it's a CPU-driven event or a device-driven event. If it's a CPU or something driven event or device-driven, if possible, we'll try to work with Teams to make it a little bit smarter, right? So that Teams is aware of that particular configuration and can actually turn on the acoustic echo cancellation function. I've done this with a couple customers. It works pretty well, right? So those are the 3 tips. So we've got QoS. Don't forget about QoS. We've got VPN and the split tunneling guidance, and then we've got echo and how to manage with your echo. All right. So hopefully one of those 3 things applies to you, and you can work to kind of try to, use some of the advice I gave you in the deck. You'll get access to the deck with all the links and stuff. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn if you have any questions about this going on. All right, moving along. We're on good time. We're 2:22. All right. So tools of the trade, right? The 3 tools that I work with a lot are Call Analytics, CQD, and Power BI, particularly with the latter one of Power BI, right? So Call Analytics, what is it, right? Essentially, it's our reactive tool. It's like, this is where we go. If somebody calls you with a problem and you pick up the phone or you get an email or a message and says, I got a problem, this is where you want to go, right? You want to start here, right? So it's a really easy to get. It's located in the Teams admin center. You just find the user that made the call, look in the admin center, and it says call history. It's got 30 days worth of call data back in there with EUI information. So it's pretty much just a smorgasbord of data, right? And we keep telemetry on both sides. So you're going to get both the client, both endpoints. You'll get the client endpoint, you'll get the service endpoint. If it's a meeting, you're going to get the client endpoint and another client endpoint if it's just a peer-to-peer call, right? So you can look at both sides, right? And what's really nice about that, if we end up losing telemetry with one, at least we have the other side, and we can at least see one half of the equation. Sometimes we lose telemetry if a client randomly disconnects, drops, or if they, close the browser, if they're in a browser and they close the browser out without ending the call, sometimes we can miss telemetry. So we do have some limited role-based access control support for there. The details are in that link right there. You can really just go out and look up, search for Teams Call Analytics, and it's gonna drop you into this page right away. So, but we can do some RBACs. So you can do, I think, 2 layers of permissions to them, like a help desk, like a couple levels of help desk permissions, followed by like an engineering position, which is full access, right? So Call Analytics will also do kind of like a quick spot check of the call. We're going to look at about 10 or 15 different classifier metrics to give you kind of a baseline to tell you if that call was poor or bad. It's not gospel. Please don't take it as gospel. Listen to your users. If your users are still saying that the bad problem, what we're going to tell you is by saying poor or bad, we're just going to say if it's good and it says it's good, it just means, hey, we've checked the network and things look pretty good on the network side, so you might have to look for somewhere else. If it says poor or bad, then you know that we've caught something, and it gives you a really good way to kind of go and do a quick look at it too. But listen to your users, right? So also ask your users lots of questions, right? Don't just take the, hey, I just had a bad call, right? Sometimes they're calling not about their own experience, but somebody else's experience, right? They're just the ones that picked up the phone or wrote the email or sent the message in, right? CQD. This is where we're going to spend a little more time today. So this is that go-to proactive tool. We do have some reactive capabilities in here, but the main point of CQD is for a proactive approach. It allows you to analyze trends over time. It's good to understand if a user is having a one-time issue, or is this a systemic problem, right? Did this just pop up today, or has this person been having problems over the last 30 days? Right, since again, we can get EUI data, right? So we can get things like wireless MAC address, right? So if you're trying to troubleshoot a wireless network and you need to narrow it down to a specific access point, you can. We can put usernames, right? So if you want to trace back to a specific person, we can look at conference ID, stuff like that, call ID. We do have a web UI that you can go to, cqd.teams.microsoft.com. It is being de-emphasized right now in favor of Power BI, right? We do have a new connector that you can get to here. The connector is really nice. It allows you to take Power BI and connect it up into CQD. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. We have a PowerShell module as well, right? So if you like PowerShell and you want to do a PowerShell, you can pull some PowerShell data down for offline manipulation. I know a couple of my colleagues do this daily with customers. They pull them down, then you import into Power BI, and you can manipulate the data in Power BI to kind of however you want to do it, right? So there's a couple of different ways that you can approach it. Last but not least, don't forget your building file, right? Building file is really important, and it basically tells CQD what subnets you own and which one you don't. CQD's primary pivot point is a subnet, right? So by getting in there and teaching CQD like, okay, these subnets are mine and these subnets are public, I don't care about them, right? So you can kind of split the traffic a little bit. You can also do things like city, state, country, region. You can put your own codes in there as well. You can label it as a VPN. I highly recommend this, right? Mostly because you want to be, the reason why you want to tag VPN is so that you can remove the VPN subnet easily from your visuals, the reports that you're going to create, so that they don't kind of influence the data, right? Because if you know you have a VPN problem, then you can at least pull it out and report on it separately, right? Also, common subnets can be a problem too. You know, 192.168.0.0, 1.0, 2.0, 172.20.16.0. There's like 6 or 7 of them. If you have these subnets anywhere within your organization, do not put them in the building file, right? Because those are so common. They're in coffee shops, they're in hotels, they're in home networks. If you start putting those into your building file, you're going to start bringing that data into your internal views, and it's going to you're going to have to create some additional filters. Like you can filter on public subnet, right? So if you have a list of public subnets, you can just create a filter and say, all right, it's got to be within this public subnet range. As long as it's within that range, it'll only give you the common subnets that are associated with that range. It's a good workaround, but it's something that you got to know about. All right, we're at 2:27. I'll speed up a little bit here because I want to get to the good demo here. So Power BI, what do you need, right? So you can start here, right? A good search for CQD, Power BI, Teams is pretty much all you need. You're going to get right to that templates there. So what do you need though? You need the June 2020 copy of Power BI later. You'll need a connector, right? Right now it's in preview stage. You have to do it manually. I'll show you here in a second. And then we have to turn off some security settings as well. We've got templates to get you started, and we've got about 8 templates that you can download, 7 that are given by the media team, and then 1 by myself, which I'm going to demo here in a little bit, which I call the QER template. All the templates are customizable. You can change them, you can modify them, you can do whatever you want with them. They're really just templates to try to get you started, to get your brains working about what's possible. It is important to note that some of the templates have implemented row-level security. You're going to want to read up on this, right? If you publish the report with RLS, you have to know about it because you'll have to go in there and assign permissions using the RLS method, right? Otherwise, if you publish a report to your online Power BI space, your colleague might not be able to get access to it, right? Unless you've put his account into the RLS profile. We do have a couple limitations currently as it stands. The Power BI connector uses direct query, right? So that is there's some limitations that come with that storage model, so read up on that, right? Top-end and advanced filtering support doesn't work right now. It has a limited functionality because it's actually acting on the data after it's queried. And so we are trying to work to build that support into the query itself so that the query, when it gets generated on the server side, on the service, the top end and filtering is happening there rather than happening on the Power BI side. So it'll greatly speed up your queries. We don't have any support for calculated columns, right? That's a function of the direct query model, right? That's not a function of the limitation of CQD. It's just the direct query that they chose. They chose direct query because it's the only model that can support the volume of data that CQD has, right? Some companies have millions and millions of records per day. I cannot even imagine the amount of data that you'd be pulling down into Power BI if you chose to do an import model or some other model. It can take up to 20 seconds to refresh a visual, right? The more visuals you have on the page, the longer it's going to take. It's usually about 5 to 7 seconds per visual. We do operate them in parallel, right? So we can do them in batches of 8, right? So keep that in mind as you're building. Currently, right now, we cannot publish to the government cloud. So if you're a government customer, we cannot publish the report. You can use Power BI Desktop, but you can't publish it yet. That's coming in the future once they move to a certified connector. Also, CQD is only limited to 10,000 results per query, right? So keep that in mind. Some of those dimensions we have, like subnet, UPN, reflexive, which is your public IP, are huge, right? And easily can produce 80, 100, 200,000 records in a query. So use the drill through method, which I'll show you here in a little bit, to get around that. Some more tips that we're going to get into. So if you've never played with Power BI before and you want to play with these templates, that's great. But what I recommend is after you've downloaded Power BI, launch it by itself for the first time. It's a pretty heavy application and it can use a lot of RAM. Try to give yourself, at least 8 gigs of RAM or more. Just so that you can have some room to cache more data. I've seen Power BI use up to 4 or 5 gigs of RAM over the course of a given day. Now, again, I'm a heavy user of Power BI, so my mileage is different than yours. All the template files are PBIT files, right? So that means when you first open them up, they're not going to be saved and you will actually have to save them. So make sure you do that. Publish that report online as well, right? So if you can publish it, once you get it to where you like, publish it, right? Put it into your own personal space. That way, once it's up in the space, you don't have to worry about your local resources being used up by Power BI anymore, and you can just use the browser to do it as well. It also means you can get to it through somewhere else. It also means you can give somebody else access to it as well so that they can view it, right? Limit your visuals, right? So lock your visuals so they don't move around on you, as well as also limit your visual interactions, right? So because the queries take time, if you've got too many visuals on the page that are all interacting with each other, clicking on one will cause all 10 others to refresh, and maybe you didn't want that, right? So make sure you're limiting your visual interactions as well. Use drill through functionality. I'm going to demo that here in a couple minutes. So we're going to use some drill through functionality. Limit your visuals as well. You want to keep yourself 16 or less is the sweet spot. I've already broken this rule. It just depends on your mileage. If you have a lot of data, if you're a big customer, millions of calls a week, you may not want to do 17, 18, 19 visuals on a page. But if you're a smaller company that just doesn't have that kind of volume, hey, your mileage will vary here, but it's going to be quicker for you. Also, you can use the web UI too, right? So the queries are the same. It uses the REST API, right? So you can get in there, you can validate through the web, and if you're not sure your results are coming back the way you want it, just fire up the web browser, recreate your query in the web, right, and look at the results and see if you're getting kind of the same results back, right? Or if they're different, it might be able to help you figure out why they're different, right? So, all right, so we're at 2:33, right, my time. So that gives us plenty of time here to jump into our Power BI demo. So that's going to end the slideshow for a minute. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you over to Power BI. Right, and so what we're going to look at here is this is the template for Power BI. This is version 2.0 of the QER, right? So you can when you download this to, from the link I'm going to provide you here, it's going to give you, there's a couple different links that you can get to that are in that Power BI section that I showed you within the presentation. That's the word I was looking for. All right, so the first one you're going to want here is, this is the main download. This gets you this PQX file. This is what you're looking for. Please read the README files. Please read the README files. Please read the README files. I can't say this enough, right? I get questions from customers all the time, and the answer's in the README file. It's not 100 pages. It's just a couple pages, right? Read through it. It'll help you get you started. They've got some nice templates in here. These ones are the ones that use RLS, the row level security. So just be aware, there's some really nice templates in here to help get you started. But you want to make sure that this Microsoft Call Quality PQX file is actually in your documents folder under the Power BI desktop, custom connectors, and it's going to sit and live right here, right? For mine, you'll download a separate file through the link I provided in the Power BI or in the presentation. And here you'll get the QER version 2.0 PBIT file along with a set of README files. Again, read the README instructions. It's only 2 pages, right? Chances are if you don't hit this, you're going to hit a problem because there's 3 things that you need to do. So that should cover that. The last thing here is making sure that you have the right security settings in place. We want to make sure that your security is set here to allow non-recommended data extensions. If you haven't set this, you'll get this funky, wild GUID error, and you might be scratching your head and just go, oh, that's right, I forgot to set this. Sometimes if you have a really old version of Power BI Desktop and you upgrade, this actually gets overwritten and it flips back to recommended state, right? So just make sure this sets to non-recommended, and that will allow you to fire up this, right? And so I'm showing you a tenant here. This is some anonymized tenant that I've got here. So this is kind of just showing you some of the data. I got a broken visual here. That's just a function of the demo gods deciding to not work against me today. All right, but you can see here we've got this nice home page, right? So here, of course, all the data is anonymized, so I'm not going to see any usernames, but you'll see a list of usernames here. We can search for a user, you can search for a subnet, or you can search for a call ID or a conference ID. If you don't know how to get one, Call Analytics is where you go, and there's a nice little documentation here on how to get the call ID. The call ID is unique, right? So it's unique per customer, or per each individual call. So you can, what's nice about this with the drill through, right? So you can just right click and I can choose drill through, and I can look at some more details, audio, video, or sharing, and I'll show you some of that in a minute here, right? We've got some general usage data here, all right, so that we can click on usage data. Now in this particular one, I refreshed the data because I wanted to show you just how fast it's going to be. And as you can see, it does take a little bit of time, right? It takes anywhere between 15 to 20 seconds for the entire page to refresh. This particular, this is some Microsoft data. This is going to show just the sheer volume, right? And how much time it's going to take. So here we go, we're starting to get some stuff in. If I had a colleague start a stopwatch, it would probably come in around the 25-second mark, right? Because you can see I did kind of bend the rules a little bit, my own rules of keeping it below 17, below 17. But I just kind of wanted to show you this report, show you some of the cool things that we can kind of do, some of the cool interactions that we can have, and some of the data. All of this can be manipulated. You can customize this to your heart's content, right? You can change things around. We can move things around. You can change the colors of the visuals if you don't like them. It's wide open, right? It's wide open. So we can look at feedback, right? So this is where you can go to get some feedback from users. How are they doing on the daily feedback, on the weekly feedback? What's the average score you're doing, right? Who's submitting the worst feedback? That's always a good one. Where's the feedback coming from? Which network? If you have your building file, you can replace subnet with something like city, right? Or building or state. It doesn't have to be narrowed down to a specific subnet. I probably should have chosen a smaller customer just to kind of show you some of the data here. But you can see we've got some color coding in here as well, all in design to try to help you. I call this the needle in the haystack finder, right? We're always trying to look for things here to try to find problems, right? The conference ID one's also really cool. All right, we can look at overall audio health, so we can kind of take a quick peek on how things are doing overall, right? We can search by product type, by call type. I can, if you got a building file, we can go inside or outside. If you got a different type of connection, wired, Wi-Fi, or mobile, we can look at. Of course, there's more room if you want to add more slicers, because you can, right? It's all limited by your imagination. I'm a car guy. I kind of like hot rods, right? So I kind of went with this tachometer type model here, just as a way to kind of show you what's going on. Oh, we can see this customer's got a little bit of a reliability issue. We can see some of the media failures here are going, but we can see overall we've got some nice target lines in here to show you the green lines. But we can see heavy usage, like 3 million, 10 million. That's one of the reasons why this is taking so long, but I just wanted to show you what it was going to feel like if you were a big customer, right? It's going to feel a little heavy at first. The nice thing about it is the more RAM you have, when I click back on this, it's loaded in there. See how it's cached in memory now, so it's a lot faster, right? So it caches it, right? Stores it. We can look at audio health. I'll show you audio health, and then we'll skip on to some other things here, because what's really cool is I'd love to show you some of the meeting things and some of the things we can do with meetings here, right? In the last couple of minutes that we have. Right. So in here, we can kind of break it down in a little bit more. This kind of takes a little bit of our Get to Green approach, right? There's a program we have within Microsoft we effectively call Get to Green. And we have these algorithms, these numbers that we assign to them. So we're looking at certain key things. So I've kind of started to share that with you. So here's some of the things that we look at, some of the metrics that we assign our own self to try to determine if something is healthy or not, right? So you can see in this particular case, right? We've got 4.73% poor here on this Wi-Fi. right, on the 2.4. 5 gigahertz is better. The wire is 2.5, which is a little unusual, right? But we can see as it goes along over the day, how's it doing day by day, week by week, wired versus Wi-Fi, 2.4 versus 5. Again, you can change these, right? If one of these doesn't fit within your model, just change it, right? I know it may sound easy, just change it. It's easy, you know. A little bit of work and you can figure it out. I'm not a Power BI guy. I had to teach myself Power BI, right? I do know the data and I know the telemetry, which did help me here. But you can see I can kind of go in here and look. And what's really cool is I can take like this subnet right here and I can right click on this guy. And I can go actually over here and look at the audio health details. Now this report's going to take about 30 seconds because as you can see, I really broke the rules here. Right, I went 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, there's more than 16 on this page, right? But what's really nice about this is going to give us a lot of details about one specific subnet, right? We're going to see who's on that subnet. We're going to see user quality. We're going to see which meetings took place on this. Now, it's only going to show you the call legs of the meeting that were on this subnet. It's not going to show you everything, just only those call legs that were impacted by that subnet and how many people were on that same subnet in that meeting. Right, we'll show you the client quality as well, so you can see the quality per client. We'll show you public subnet, right? So you can see, are you having a lot of your problems coming from one specific subnet, you know, egress. Now we are bringing ASN information into CQD. That should be coming shortly. I don't have a timetable on that, so we're going to be bringing in ASN information for you as well. All right, so there's those conference IDs. We can look at daily quality. We can look at endpoint. Endpoint is a UII, so it'd be like a machine name, right? We can see Wi-Fi band, right? We do have some blank data in here. I'm not hiding blanks. I'm doing that on purpose, and mostly because with Power BI, just because the data is blank doesn't mean it has no value, right? Blank data can have value because it can be tied to other things. We just might be missing that only one little specific piece of data, but we still have everything else. So I don't really want to hide it, right? I want to show you that it's there. But you can see here, what's really nice also is we can actually take and click on the little focus mode and we can blow things up, right? And we can kind of look at things a little bit better, right? We can see Teams. Here's a couple of Skype for Business, you know, that were on this network. That's mostly because this is a, what's the word I'm looking for? This is a home network, 10.0.0.0 network, right? We can see the number of poor streams sorted. We can see different things. You can see latency here has been a big driver for this one, right? And of course, why was it poor? You know, what caused it to be poor as well? So hopefully here by looking at usernames and conference ID and stuff, you can see for this particular one, I'd like to take this guy right here. I can drill through. I can go and look at meeting health details. This is another one of my favorites here. How many of you have had to sit there and try to figure out what went wrong with a meeting, right? Who was the problem? What happened in that meeting, right? It's almost a daily occurrence for some of you, right? So getting in here and kind of looking at this is, so now we're going to be looking at it within the context of that individual meeting. So we're going to look at public subnet, we're going to look at clients, we're going to look at user agent, we're going to look at feedback. Was there any feedback given during the meeting, right? Is Wi-Fi a factor? Did it impact, right? Was there a particular endpoint? We're also going to be able to show you a ton of data just for that one individual call. So we're going to look at participant names, subnet, start, end time, what connection they used, what device they used, transport, what media type they used, what were the measurements there, was there a reason why it was poor, what was that reason, right? Anything, you know, everything and everything to try to help you figure it out, right? And you can see you can hover over it and it's going to pop up this nice big box for you in case you're like me and you have to wear glasses and it's hard to see because there's too much data. But what's really nice about this, say you find somebody in here like this person right here, right? So they were literally like one of the only ones here, right? So then you can go over here, right click. I could be able to right click on that person and go look at their health. And then, now I'll do this here. It's not going to work because I got 1 minute left here. But now we're looking at user details from a user point of view. So now we're looking at everything for that one specific user. And so we can look at we can go up to 30 days, right? But I've scoped it to 7 days. You can go longer if you want to look a little bit farther back, right? This is a really, really good way to try to tell if that one particular user has a constant, consistent problem. And every time they join a meeting, they create a problem for people. And I'm at time on that one. So on that note, thank you for joining my session on Talking Quality with Matt Wade. You can find me on LinkedIn. You'll get a copy of this presentation afterwards and you'll have all my links, but if you have any questions, just find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'll be.
So we had one question in the Q&A right before the beginning of the session.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So
Brian
the
Staples.
question.
Yeah.
Yes. So I got it. Thanks. So the question from Brian Staples was: you mentioned GPO to set Windows DCP. Is there any config settings for this? Fortunately, at this point in time, I don't know if there is. Only way that I know how to do it is through a GPO. Right. You can do it if you can't do it through the registry. You can take the GPO, export it to a registry, and do it that way. But it's just a registry change. So GPO is the most effective way to do it. So thank you everybody for your time today. I hope you found this useful. And have a great rest of your Commsverse. Good time at Commsverse. Yeah. Thanks, Randy.